Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I'm looking for nods from my my teammates. Hi, everyone. My name's Jen Goldfinch, and welcome to our Foundry virtual events. Did I just lose? Oh, hi, that's me. Welcome. We're really excited about today's webinar. We have a lot of people who are joining us today. We're very, very excited. My colleague David and I are here from Foundry, and we're very, very excited that Ben McEwan's joining us all the way from Vancouver, Canada, all the way from Australia via Vancouver, Canada, where he is right now. We have a really exciting webinar today, so I'm not going to take too long because Ben really is the one that you want to hear. But we're going to walk through a couple of things that we have going on with our virtual events. We're really happy that you're here to join us. One of the things that I love the most about Foundry is that we're lucky enough to get to travel and visit customers and spend lots of time with studios in a normal world. And right now, the world we're living doesn't enable us to do this. So we're really excited that we're able to do these virtual events, have folks like Ben be here with us today and give us the chance to connect with you. So we'll be on the chat, we'll be talking, we're here to answer your questions. We'll ask you a couple of polls and hopefully you'll find this valuable. Hopefully you find it valuable. So we have a lot of stuff going on. We bucket them in 3 different subjects. So when you see them on our website, a webinar is a technical session, Skill Up is oriented towards training, and a session is when we invite a customer in to talk about something they worked on, whether it's a project or what Ben's going to discuss today. So we have a full schedule up on Foundry.com events, and I'll highlight a couple of the Nuke ones later. We're aiming to run about 2 virtual events a week. We've done 7 so far, so thank you for everyone who's joined us. I see some familiar faces on the chat already with Hugo and Jonas. So thank you guys for being there, and many, many more, of course. We also wanted to let you know that we're working on a Foundry Live event in June. We're calling it Foundry Live Stream, which will be a trade show-like environment where we're trying to bring in some customer presentations. So we're working through the approvals now, but we're hoping to announce that soon. And we also want to let everyone know that we've reset all of our Foundry product trials. So if you're interested in giving Nuke a go, the latest version, you could download the 30-day trial at home, and that's been reset if you've used it before. Any feedback for us, please send to virtual.events@foundry.com. That goes to my team, and we really want to hear what you think and what you're looking for. Oh, that's why the numbers went up from you so fast. We have a lot of people on the call because Hugo Guerra brought them over from his quick stream. Thank you, Hugo. So keeping up to date with Foundry, I'm going to go quick because we want to get to Ben and David. We have a Foundry Insights Hub on our website. So there's tons of customer stories and videos there. We just posted one about working with Nuke in television and episodic. We just posted a video with Outpost VFX based in Montreal and the UK. So we encourage you to take a look. And at the bottom of that page, you can sign up for our quarterly newsletter. And that'll give you the information every couple of months that what we've posted and what's recent. If you want to follow us on social media, we're usually on the handle Foundry Team or the Foundry Team. Take a look. We post everything that we have, very active on LinkedIn and Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So please follow us there. And now I'd just like to call out all of our awesome industry partnerships that we work with. So we work with Access VFX based in the UK with operations in the US. This is a wonderful mentor-mentee program. Suggest you take a look at it if you have time to give the next generation of VFX artists. This is a great way to do it. If you're an up-and-coming VFX artist and you're looking for a mentor, check out Access VFX. They have a matching program where they help people with their careers. Since there's a lot of people interested in Python today, I also wanted to call out the ASWF. Foundry is a proud partner of the Academy Software Foundation, where they work on wonderful tools that are important to Nuke, like OpenEXR and many, many others. So they're always looking for developers to contribute to the open source community there. If you're a developer, take a look and check it out, please. Of course, we do love our friends from SIGGRAPH and the VES, who are helping people with information and training, and online activities are being created by those organizations. So keep an eye on them and keep your membership current if you can. So coming up for the Nuke family on our webinar program, we seem to have a run. We try and share with all of our different products. We had a few Katana things and Amari webinar recently, but the next 3 counting today are all about Nuke. So next Tuesday with Courtney Price, we have a wonderful skill up session, how to become a senior compositor from your mid-level skills. It's going to be really great. We're really excited for that. On Thursday, we have a very special panel with 4 Nuke TDs from across the world who are going to be talking about what it takes to become a Nuke TD and how you can help contribute to the pipeline with your developer skills. So that's going to be pretty awesome. We have folks joining us from Digital Domain, Method Studios, Cinesite, and Saddington Baines based in London. Beyond that, we have a VFX Soup panel coming up, a Nuke Studio story for small businesses working remote in these times, more with Katana, Mari, Flix, and Moto. We're looking at different time zones. So again, we have lots more coming up. So thank you for staying with us. Take a look at our foundry.com events page for everything and how you can register. And just finally, people keep asking us, so I figured I'd throw a slide up. We actually are hiring for a couple of jobs right now, even in this remote time frame, because everyone at Foundry is working remote, like our customers are too. So we have a couple of jobs. So if you are looking for work, please take a look at our career section, and we'd be more than happy to have a conversation. And thank you. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, David.
So hello, and welcome to this Foundry session on how to improve your Nuke workflow in Python. I'm David Nolan, one of the product managers on the Nuke team, and today we're joined by Ben McEwan. Ben is a compositing supervisor at ImageEngine, the author of Ben's Comp newsletter, which is a great resource, and if you haven't checked it out, I would encourage you to do so. And Ben has also got a great 10-part course on learning Python for Nuke. So Ben is a great contributor to the VFX community, and it's fantastic to have him here today. Welcome, Ben.
Hello, everybody.
So Ben's got an introductory presentation on why Python is a powerful tool that every compositor should have in their tool belt. And after that, we'll have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat, and we'll come to them in the second half. So without further ado, it's over to Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben McEwan, and I'm a compositing supervisor and VFX mentor. I started my compositing career using Nuke in 2011 and have worked with many studios since, including Rising Sun Pictures, Method, Oat Studios, DNEG, ILM, and I'm currently a compositing supervisor at ImageEngine in Vancouver. I'm also the author of Ben's Comp newsletter, a bi-weekly newsletter designed to help compositors stay at the top of their game and rapidly advance their careers. I started Ben's Comp newsletter in January 2018 as a way to both share and solidify the knowledge I'd gained throughout my career with others. I noticed that there were plenty of 3D-based websites revolving around showcasing people's work and learning resources for myriads of 3D disciplines, but there weren't and still aren't really that many resources out there for compositors. Throughout my career, Ben's Comp newsletter is something I would have massively benefited from, so I created this resource for others who are hoping to rapidly develop their compositing careers as well. Subscribers to the newsletter receive the best gizmos, Python scripts, workflow tips, and in-depth knowledge on compositing techniques to help keep their toolsets and skill sets at the forefront of the VFX industry. I hope it encourages open communication and knowledge sharing between the global compositing community so we can all grow better together. As you might have gathered, self-improvement and continued learning has been a huge focus in both my life and my career, and I'm always encouraging others to choose this path as well. I often hear compositors mention some flavor of, I really wish I knew Python, and since you're watching this webinar, I presume that's been you at some point recently. Don't worry, I used to be one of these people too, but one day with no prior programming experience, I decided to take action and teach myself. As a complete beginner, I was trying to piece together knowledge from various blogs and YouTube videos, and I was also attempting to go through Foundry's Python documentation. And whilst it's really good documentation and makes a lot of sense, with no prior programming experience or any context for what I was even trying to achieve, this way of learning proved pretty difficult. Although ultimately through years of trial and error and just figuring things out on my own the hard way, I gained a level of decent competence which opened up a world of efficiency in my work, both as an artist and a supervisor who uses Nuke daily. So how exactly does Python benefit compositors, and why should you learn Python? Well, under the hood, Nuke is built with Python at its core, which allows for a robust amount of programmability and customizability. This programmability benefits compositors who are conscious of not wasting time on menial tasks, but instead are willing to harness the power of simple customization and automation to take care of the laborious tasks and ultimately free up more time for the fun and creative work. The scope of what you can achieve with Python is massive too. From small things such as renaming nodes or force reloading all read nodes in your Nuke script, to developing entire pipelines and even entirely new tools from scratch. It's hard to understate how much of a difference customizing Nuke to work the way you want to work is. Even seemingly small things like changing knobs' default values and customizing menus to work the way that your brain thinks means small amounts of time saved each time, and that accumulates really quickly over the course of a day or even an entire project. Today, I want to show you what's possible in Nuke with even a basic understanding of Python. This webinar is primarily about enhancing productivity and efficiency in Nuke as an artist, and Python is just the tool we're using to achieve this. Because Nuke's spine is Python, artists using it can control almost every aspect of it programmatically. Now let's jump over to Nuke and I'll show you a couple of things. So by enabling echo Python commands in our Nuke preferences and keeping the script editor open, watch what happens when we do anything. I'm going to create a grade node here and see how in the top of the script editor you can see it says nuke.createNode grade, and even copy pasting this node outputs code as well. The fundamentals of programming in Nuke are about understanding what's going on under the hood and harnessing that knowledge to do what you require. How you improve your workflow in Nuke is a really personal experience. Think about tasks that take you a long time to complete, or even small frustrations in the way that Nuke works that you'd like fixed. These are perfect candidates for your first step in Python. For some inspiration, there are tons of Python scripts available on Nukepedia which you can easily install and can add to your own menus. Let me show you how you can do this. When programming, you'll often write code in an IDE, which stands for Integrated Development Environment. IDEs offer features such as syntax highlighting and certain shortcuts which make writing code easier. A few popular options include PyCharm, Atom, and Sublime Text. Although I often like to test small chunks of my code as I write it to make sure each section is working as expected in Nuke Script Editor. While the script editor runs the code, it doesn't actually have any of the nice features that these dedicated IDEs have, and this makes it harder to debug erroneous parts of my Python scripts. Adrian Pueyo clearly had this same frustration, so he wrote his own Python script editor using Python directly for Nuke. Super meta. So we're going to install NobScripter as a demonstration of how easy it is to get any Python script from Nukepedia and install it and get using it to improve your workflow. You can download NobScripter from Nukepedia. You'll have to log in first before it will give you a download button. And here we go. We can go and download it. You have to agree to the terms and conditions and save it. So we have two folders open here. One is our NobScripter zip file and one is our .nuke directory. Now when you open Nuke for the first time, it creates this .nuke directory inside your user directory. And this is where a bunch of files live that Nuke needs to operate. One of these files is a menu.py. And you might have heard of that before, but a menu.py is a Python file itself which holds Python code that executes every time Nuke opens. And we use the menu.py to do all sorts of things. If you're interested in learning more about a menu.py and the basics of what can go in there and how to use it, you can go over to my blog where I've written an article called What is a menu.py and Why Should I Have One? So if you don't have a menu.py file in your .nuke folder by default, it's pretty easy to create one. You can just right click, choose new text document and type menu.py. You'll have to delete the .text because we want it to be a Python file, not a text file, and hit yes on that. And then we can open this up. So I'm using Sublime Text as my IDE. To install any Python file, all you have to do is copy paste whatever the file is into your .nuke directory. So I'm going to drag all of those in here. And you'll notice the knob_scripter.py. This is the Python file that we want to import every time Nuke opens. So to do that, let's go back to Sublime. The first line that we should write in here is import Nuke. Python is made up of a bunch of different modules and it comes with a standard library of functions and things you can do with it. But to do any specific Nuke functions like create a node perhaps, we need to import the Nuke module, and this is written by Foundry. So to install Knobscriptor, we just have to import it like the way we do with the Nuke module. And we can do that by importing the name of this file itself. So let's type import Knobscriptor. I find it best to copy and paste the name of the file, and that way it ensures there's no spelling errors. Let's save our menu PY and open up Nuke. So now that Nuke's open, we can access the script editor by right-clicking and going Windows, New Script Editor. And this is the vanilla script editor where we can type any code and run it directly in Nuke. We just installed Knobscriptor though, so let's use that. Notice the difference in syntax highlighting and a few different options up here. I much prefer Knobscriptor just because it's a lot easier to read the code and has some fun extra features. So as you can see, installing other people's Python scripts is super easy to do with just a little bit of code. This alone opens up so many possibilities for new, time-saving functionality in Nuke, so I would highly encourage you to look through Nukepedia's archives and install the ones that sound interesting to you. Now that we have Knobscriptor installed, we can write some code ourselves. As we're short on time, we're going to be moving pretty fast here, but I want to show you what's possible with just a few lines of code. So a real-world example of something that I do 99% of the time is attach a blur node to a roto node whenever I create one. No images captured by the best camera in the world with the best lens in the world will be a perfect pixel sharp, so neither should our roto shapes. By default, the O hotkey creates our roto node. When we hit it, you can see it outputs the nuke.create node roto code. Input, output. We can change that hotkey to absolutely anything we like, and it's often best practice to build upon existing functionality so we don't have to relearn things that have been baked into our muscle memory. To do almost anything in Python, we need to write a function. Kind of like how Gizmo wraps up a collection of nodes to perform specific tasks, a function holds all of your code and groups it together, and then that's executed to perform specific tasks. So to write a function, you simply have to define it, and we can define a new function by typing def. Now let's give it a name. Call it rotoblur shortcut. We follow the name of the function by open close parentheses and then a colon. Now let's add one line of code to our function. We can type print and then open quotes. My code is working. Great. Now, if we run our code, which you can do by clicking this button up here, or you can see the shortcut is Control-Enter, nothing happens, it just stays here. To run our code, we have to call our function. And to do that, we can highlight the name, including the open close parentheses, copy-paste, and now let's try run this. From here on, I'm just going to use the Control-Enter shortcut because it's easier. So now you can see the result is my code is working great. So we've defined our function, and inside our function, we've got instructions for it to do, and then we're running it. Super simple, right? So what's with these parentheses? Well, these will hold arguments, which we can demonstrate right now, because we want to add our function to one of these menus on the side here. Kind of like how there's different ways to achieve this same result when compositing, the same actually applies to programming. And the easiest way to access an existing menu in Nuke is to add it again. So let's add some more code down here. And this looks more intimidating than this for sure, but I assure you it's pretty easy to understand. So see how each one of these functions has an open close parentheses and it's got things in between. Let's go through this one by one and see what this is going to do. So we're finding the menu nodes, which is what this is called here. Then we're adding that menu again, the draw menu, which is this guy here. And we're going to put it in here just because it's where the roto already lives. Then we're adding a command to that menu, and we're giving it this label, create roto and blur node. Then we're going to be running our function, roto blur shortcut. We define the hotkey for that, and then we're going to give it an icon. So this add command function is exactly the same as running the rotoblur shortcut function, but part of the add command function has all these different arguments to tell it to do other things. So if we highlight this, and I'm going to use my Control-Enter shortcut once again, you can see the script editor outputs this result, menu item. So if we go into here and go all the way down to the bottom, you can see we've got Create Rotor and Blur Node, just as we've labeled it here. We can see our shortcut is O, we've got our icon. So now in our node graph, if I press the O hotkey, my code is working great. Let's do it again. It's still working great. And that's because every time we've pressed this O hotkey, we're running the RotoBlur shortcut now. So let's go ahead and change this RotoBlur shortcut to actually do what this code should do. So I've cleared the output window here just so we can have a fresh start and see exactly what's going on as we change this code. Before I start to type any new code, I usually like to think about the individual steps that it needs to do. So right now, our goal is we want to press the O hotkey to run the menu item, and it's going to create a roto node, it's going to create a blur node, and maybe it can change some values too. So let's start off with the node creation. We want to create a roto node and a blur node, so we can do that with 2 lines of code. Remember, the first line of code we saw was nuke.createNode. So this is using the createNode function from the Nuke module. And inside here, let's create a roto node. Same thing, we can create a blur node. And so we only want one indentation for both of these lines of code because we only want it inside this RotoBlur shortcut function. And we actually don't want this RotoBlur shortcut function here because every time we run this code, it's going to run this and also add the menu item. So let's delete that. I'm using Control-Enter once again to run the code. Its output, there's no errors. So let's click over here and press O. There we go. It's done exactly what we want. So the next steps that I would normally do is set the output knob to RGBA, and I would set my blur node value to 2. Although this kind of defeats the purpose if we press the shortcut, but we still have to change these things. So let's automate that as well. To do that, we can just put a comma to add another argument. And let's type the knob name, which is output, but you actually have to hover over and see what the bold word is in the tooltip. That's the real name of the knob. So let's do output. Let's type RGBA. And for the blur node, we know the knob is called size. So let's do comma size. So knob name 2, which is the value. We'll highlight this and Control-Enter to run. Let's try our O shortcut one more time. It's done exactly that. Clear this. We open our roto node, it's set it to RGBA, and our blur is set to 2. Now, if we're doing a few other things here, it might be a little bit annoying for so many new panels to open up. So we can actually add one other function that's included in the Nuke module to not open this properties panel at all. We can do that by adding the hide control panel function. So this just means this blur properties panel won't open at all. So if this blur properties panel doesn't open, it's probably good practice to just print this value on the node itself. So to do that, we can set a label. So in here, we've got our knob name and our value. So let's do another space. We'll type label because that's our knob name here. And we just need a little bit of TCL. So I have to create 2 quotation marks because we want to do a string. And in Python, a string just means text. So let's give our label open close bracket because we need that for TCL in the label. And we'll type value size. So value, the name of the size knob. Let's run this code again with Control-Enter. Hit our O hotkey. And there we go. Just to be clear, I'll clear the properties panel. Let's do that one more time, and we only have our roto node there ready to go and start drawing our shape. And it will automatically be blurred 2 pixels. So let's go through our code one more time. To start, we're defining a RotoBlur shortcut function. And inside that, and we know it's inside because of the indentations, we're creating a roto node and we're setting the output knob to RGBA. Then we're creating a blur node and we're setting the size knob to 2 and we're giving it a label on the node of whatever the value of the size is. Lastly, we're hiding the control panel so it doesn't open over here. Then this long line of code is looking at the nodes menu. It's finding the draw menu and it's re-adding it again to access it. Then we're adding a command to it, create roto blur node, which is here. Whenever this is pressed, we're going to run the roto blur shortcut function, which we've defined here, or we can press the O hotkey. And lastly, we're going to give it this roto icon. It's the same as the roto node here. 4 lines of code. We've already customized Nuke to do what we want. It's super simple. However, there is one gotcha to this. If we were going to open a new instance of Nuke, which I'll do now, let's go to NobScriptor. You can see our code is remembered here, which is great. But if I hit our O hotkey, it's just creating the regular roto node, which is what Nuke's default is. So how can we get it to remember this? Let's copy this. We'll open up our menu py and paste it in and hit save. So because this menu py file is loaded every single time Nuke is opened, it's going to look at all of this code. So it's going to define the roto blur shortcut and it's going to add our create roto on blur node menu item and add the shortcut here. This is a perfect example of why we imported the Nuke module. Because this is an external Python file, we have to import the Nuke module to be able to use the Nuke module like we have been down here. And that's really all there is to it. You've just made your first shortcut super easy, right? Let's try one more example. So there's 2 things that I frequently find myself doing with Python and Nuke. The first annoyance I have is any node like the scanline render node or perhaps the transform node, the shutter offset is set to start. Here and here. In the real world, that's not really how camera shutters work. We usually, 99% of the time, will set it to centered. And we don't even have to write a custom function to do this. We can use one of the functions already built into the Nuke module called knobDefault. So we can grab our shutter offset knob, and by hovering over, you can see the name of the knob is shutter offset, not shutter space offset. And we'll set the value to centered. So let's run this code, create a transform node, and look at that, it's doing it by default now. Because we've written it like this, it's kind of a global knob default. So any node with a shutter offset knob, like perhaps the motion blur 2D node, has a shutter offset of centered. Although what happens if we want to keep all of the shutter offsets to start, but only change the transform shutter offset to centered? We have to get a bit more specific. And we can do that by just adding the nodes class here. So transform.shutter offset. Now, because we've already set the global default, we're still going to get the centered shutter offset for everything else here. So we're going to have to redo that. So shutter offset, let's just set it to end to be something different. So any node with a shutter offset knob is going to be set to end, and any transform node with a shutter offset is going to be set to centered. Let's run this and watch it in action. So we'll create a scanline render node. You can see it's set to end. We'll create a transform node. It's set to centered. The last thing I want to show you is where the real power of Python comes in. So the last 2 examples, we've shown code where each line only does one thing. But where programming, and especially Python and Nuke, comes in handy and can be really powerful for an artist is by writing a couple of lines of code, but having it do so much more. So here's a snippet that I've brought in, and I use this one all the time to globally set motion blur values on every single node. So for example, you probably know what happens if you've got a big shot with heaps of CG characters or something, your Nuke script is massive and you've forgotten to turn motion blur on. Or maybe you just want it off as you work and you turn it on to render. As you can imagine, going through every single node and trying to not forget any node with a motion blur knob can be pretty tedious. So for example, let's just create a few transform nodes here. And I want to set the motion blur to on for each one of these nodes. So before I would have to go through each one, like go through my script and change this. But instead, I can just run this 3 lines of code, which is going to do that for me. See? Let's set everything to 1. Now I can see my motion blur, I can render it. If my script gets too heavy, I can just set that to 0, run it again. Every single node has a motion blur knob set to 0, and it's going to run fast. We haven't had to go through each one individually. It's just 3 lines of code, and it's done it for every node in the script. So to run through the code and how it's actually working, we're looking at all nodes in the Nuke script. And for each one, we're just assigning it a value of I. It's like X in algebra, basically. So what happens is it goes through one by one. It goes to the first node and it says, does this node have a motion blur knob? If yes, let's go to the next line. And let's set the motion blur knob's value to a value of 0, or 1, or 5, whatever you want. If you were to have a blur node or something without that motion blur knob, we'd look through all the nodes. So we've done this one, then it goes on to this one. Is there a motion blur knob? Nope. So it just doesn't do anything, and it goes to the next node, and it repeats, and it repeats, and it repeats, and it does it for every node in your script. So as I'm sure you can see by now, a few lines of code can do so many things in your Nuke script. Just a few seconds of writing out a few lines of code is going to save many minutes of searching through your Nuke script and can eliminate any possibility of forgetting 1 or 2 nodes and having to re-render all your pre-comps and everything again. I hope this brief introduction has shed some light on what's actually possible in Nuke with just a little bit of basic knowledge of Python and how that knowledge can improve your workflow. These 3 examples are the most basic of basic and already open the door to so many opportunities for both customizing Nuke to work the way you want it to work and also running some pretty labor-intensive tasks very quickly and painlessly. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to Ben's Comp newsletter at this link on the screen to keep up to date with everything I'm sharing, and also check out my blog for more quick Python tips. Of course, if your appetite has been whet and you want to learn some more about the fundamentals of Python in Nuke in an easy project-oriented manner, you may do so by taking my increasingly popular Python for Nuke 101 course. While there are various tutorials on Python in Nuke available, they all aim to outline certain parts, presuming you have a pre-existing Python knowledge or are purely theoretical and aren't particularly applicable to daily compositing life. As I did with Ben's Comp newsletter, I created the resource that would have greatly benefited me when I embarked on learning Python years ago, so you don't have to stumble through the same confusing path that I did. Python for Nuke 101 packs all the most useful and actionable information for complete beginners into 10 video lessons with an optional mentorship component at the end for continued learning. It comes with finished Python scripts, cheat sheets, and code snippets to reference whenever you need a refresher, and challenges at the end of every lesson to test and solidify your knowledge. Thanks to Foundry, by attending this webinar, 5 lucky people will gain access to this course for free. You can check out more about the course, including specifics on what you'll learn and Python scripts you'll create over on the website. And that concludes the demonstration part of this webinar. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes doing a Q&A, so please feel free to ask any questions about me, the Python for Nuke 101 course, or just Python and Nuke in general. We're all students for life and there are no silly questions. Back to you, David.
Thanks, Ben. I think that was really great. I hope everybody watching found it useful. So Ben, you've made a really compelling case for why using Python to automate some of the small things that you do every day is powerful. But the power of Python in Nuke goes way beyond these small examples. Do you have any examples of some of the big, more powerful things that you've done with Python in the past?
Yeah, totally. So Python is kind of the backbone of pretty much any pipeline in any studio. So even though like yourself as an artist or like me as a supervisor don't write the pipeline, the tools that I'm using pretty much every day to like even like bring in my plates and my cameras or publish my shot to the farm or to Shotgun, everything is written in Python. So imagine having to do that kind of stuff manually. It would take quite some time. But in terms of what you can do as an artist, something I used to find myself doing all the time, and now especially as a compositing supervisor, is creating contact sheets to compare similar shots in the sequence. I'm always encouraging artists on my team to do the same thing because it's pretty important to review your work in context. But it's pretty time consuming to pull in like each shot, especially if you've got like a massive sequence of 50 shots or so, and bring them into Nuke one by one, hook up the contact sheet node. So something that I've personally done is written an automated version of that. So based off the existing pipeline, I can pull in all of those shots based off a text file. And then I have a Python script that I wrote, which is publicly available, called auto contact sheet, to basically hook all that up for me, give me all the information I need. And it's something that takes me maybe 30 seconds to get, instead of manually building it every day for like 5 minutes.
Cool. I mean, I think you really hit on what the real power with Python is there. It's being able to go and get bits of information from various different places and pull them in a very fast and efficient way, in a way that would take a very long time to do it manually. We've actually got a really good example of something similar to what you've described on the Hero Python dev guide. We've got a Python script that will go and get all of the shots in your Hero timeline, pull them into an Excel spreadsheet, and there you can add tags and tasks and everything that you'd need to, and then batch import them back into Hero, and add all your tags and everything are added automatically. And that sounds very similar to the kind of contact sheet thing that you've been doing. So yeah, if people want to check out something like that, I'd encourage you to check out the Hero Python dev guide. Or where can people find your auto contact sheet?
We can share a link in the chat, I guess. I can post that in there now. Here we go. I actually, like, if anybody wants to know how I put it together, I wrote a blog post about kind of how that's going on too, which I'll share in the chat with everybody too.
Fantastic. So I think it's clear that there's value in learning Python if you're a compositor. But learning a programming language can be quite intimidating. As compositors, we're artists. We tend to think in pictures, not code. So what would you say to somebody who's interested in learning Python for Nuke, but doesn't consider themselves a programmer and is somewhat intimidated by the prospect?
Right. It's a pretty important point to touch on. Before I knew Python and kind of saw why it could benefit me, I thought exactly the same way. It's like, there's these pictures and these images I'm creating, and there's this whole world of programming over here. Like, I'm not a programmer, but like, how does it help? When learning it myself, I pretty quickly found that like Python is very easy to understand, especially compared to some of the more frequently used development programming languages like C++ or whatever. But Python is super easy to understand because it's designed to be human readable. All the commands are in logical English. So as you saw in the demonstration, I could pretty easily talk through what the code was doing, and you can read along and kind of see everything kind of how it is. So it's kind of like seeing the Matrix, but without needing to, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Another interesting thing too is compositors already kind of think programmatically, and there's a lot of, when it comes to programming, there's a lot of importance on syntax and putting things in a logical order, and that's exactly how we comp shots together. Like a Nuke script is pretty much like a Python script. It's just a series of operations which are executed in the order that you put them in. But learning Python is kind of like learning Nuke. Like, I don't know about anybody else, but the first time I opened Nuke many years ago, I didn't know which nodes did what, and I had to learn that. And through the practice of doing shots for days on end, like, you get used to it. And programming is the same thing, especially inside Nuke. Once you kind of understand what the modules do inside, or what the commands inside the Nuke module does, you kind of get used to what does what and how you can piece the puzzle pieces together to do what you need. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so you've convinced me. I'm ready to start learning Python. You mentioned your training course, which is an excellent resource. And for those of you who are starting out with Python, that's a great place to start. I would encourage you to do so. But what other resources are there for learning Python? What was useful to you when you were starting out before you had your course?
Right. Well, my approach for learning Python was just to try and learn the language as it is, and without kind of any context for what I was trying to achieve there. I found it like easy enough to understand the syntax, but without a project or like something solid to put my code towards, like a goal to try and achieve with the code, I didn't really find it that easy. And that's kind of why I designed my course the way I did. But it was something that helped was definitely Nuke's Python developer guide. There's a getting started section, which is the perfect place to start, where it kind of walks you through a few steps one by one. So if you just need to remember, like, how do I create a node with Python, or how do I set a knob default or something like that, it's a pretty great place to go. I also taught myself just by enabling that echo Python commands thing in the preferences.
Yeah, that's really useful.
Yeah, like just watching what Nuke does and the code it outputs when you do the things that you would do with your hotkeys or like whatever when you do your shots in Nuke every day. It's pretty useful because you can start to kind of piece together the actions you're doing and then the code that's being run. And I guess the last thing is just picking apart other people's work. Like there are so many super intelligent people creating really, really cool Python tools, and Nukepedia is a great resource to download those and read through the code.
Cool. Yeah, I think just to touch on something you said there, but may have slipped by. It's really difficult to learn Python without something to work towards, I find. Having a project is a really powerful way to really learn the tool. And I think the examples in your course are great because they lead you step by step through these kind of projects. But another great way to do it is just to pick a thing you want to do, and then you can figure it out. There's a lot of Googling and a lot of looking on the internet, looking in the developer's guide, looking on Nukepedia for examples. But that's a great way to really learn how to use Python, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree.
So lastly, before we move on to some questions from the audience, you've shown that Python is really powerful and can really boost productivity in Nuke. But what are its limitations? What's the point at which you need to move beyond Python and onto something else?
Right. So the easiest way to think about it is Python is for manipulating Nuke itself. So you're trying to use the code that is already there to execute the functions, but you're kind of doing that manually yourself. Like you're replacing your own actions with code to do it for you. Mm-hmm. If you want to manipulate pixels, that's kind of an entirely different thing. And BlinkScript exists in Nuke, and that's awesome. It's not Python, obviously. It's a different programming language, but there's kind of different tools or different languages to do different things. So the limitations kind of come from like, you can create new things and new tools, but you're using it to manipulate underlying code that's already there. And you can think about it like a gizmo, essentially, where you can put a collection of nodes inside a group, expose the controls that you need to change, and you've got a gizmo. And Python's kind of like the same thing, but for operating Nuke, I guess. And then if you want to write some more advanced tools, there's the Nuke Developer Kit, and that's based off C++. And that's for more like if you want to create your own nodes and brand new things.
Cool. Yeah. Touching on BlinkScript, that's a really powerful way to really manipulate the image data that you're getting through. If you're interested in what BlinkScript can do, I'd encourage people to check out Mads Hagbarth's point render tool. I don't know if you've seen that, Ben.
Yeah, I love that.
Mads has done some crazy stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty inspiring to see. I've played around with it a little bit, haven't had a chance to put it into shots, but what you can do with BlinkScript, and even the upcoming the particle blink script node is going to open up a world of possibilities for that.
Yeah, I think there's with Python and with blink scripts, and if you really want to go to the nth degree with the NDK, you can really make Nuke do exactly what you want it to do. All right, so let's throw to some questions from the audience. We've got a question from Max Chan that is about, is there a difference between writing Python scripts for Linux/Unix versus for Windows?
Yeah, so I use Windows at home, and that's what the demonstration was done in. But Python is a platform-independent programming language. So each operating system has to figure out how to interpret Python. But the way you write Python and run Python in Windows or on a Mac or on Linux is exactly the same. So I have my own menu.py with my own shortcuts and tools and things that I've written, and I'll take that anywhere with me, and depending on what studio uses, Linux or Mac, it doesn't matter. It all works the same.
Cool. Then the next question is, when is it smarter to use TCL, and when is Python the better choice?
Right. So TCL I always think of as a way to display the information. So like we kind of touched on in the presentation, I use it all the time to just display information about what my nodes are doing on the node itself. There are certain things you can do, like referencing or like changing values elsewhere, but Python is a bit more robust, mostly just because that's what Nuke's spine is. Yeah. Okay.
And then related to that, is there any way to get the evaluation of a TCL expression and store it as a variable in a Python script?
To my knowledge, no. I would really encourage people not to try and mix programming languages, because it can get pretty messy pretty quickly. So, for example, you can, inside your square brackets, if you're using TCL, you can use Python commands inside of that. But if you were just trying to store the value of a knob as a variable, it would be much quicker, like more efficient and easier for you to write if you did it 100% in Python.
You can use Python TCL expressions as there's a set expression command on the knobs, and you can put TCL expressions in there, which is sometimes easier. But I would agree with you, mixing programming languages is probably not the best way to go. Okay, so we have a question. This is probably a question for me, asked by Felix Pitchler. What is the status of Python 3? Python 3 is coming. It's good news and bad news depending on how you look at it, but it is definitely coming. We are planning to have Python 3 in the next major release of Nuke, so that'll be Nuke 13. We're also planning on a long alpha and beta period for this release, so that you can get your pipelines ready for what is going to be a big change. Customers who are currently on maintenance will have access to the alpha. And if you want to make sure that you're on that list, then you can contact us or your account manager. So another question that we have from the audience is there a way to create a frame hold node to set the current frame by default whenever I create that node?
Yeah, I'm happy somebody asked this, because this was literally the first project that I did when I was learning Python. We kind of had a demonstration of how to create a function and how to create a knob default in 2 separate instances. But you can do it that way. So in the Nuke module, you can do nuke.frame with the open close parentheses, and it will return the frame number. That would be a really good first place to start. We already touched on how, like, if you kind of have a project or a goal in mind when you're programming, it kind of really helps you to learn. So that's a good one. So to kind of wrap that up, kind of like when you're comping a shot, there's more than one way to use Python to achieve this. But the knob default command is the one that you want to look for in conjunction with the nuke.frame function.
It's actually the first, or one of the first things that I did with Python as well, was to create a button on the frame hold node, which you pressed and it would set it to the current frame. So it seems like a commonly requested one and a good little project to get you started with Python.
Definitely.
So a question for Ben. What kind of coding projects did you work on as a lead or soup? Did you find that the Python projects differ depending on the show and or depending on the compositor level?
Yeah, it's kind of going to be a personal experience. Like the things that I feel like I need to do or improve efficiency for myself might be different for you. As a lead and a supervisor, we kind of already touched on the contact sheet thing. That would be something I would do all the time. But I could also use Python to create like tools for the team, like stuff that would plug into the existing pipeline, but allow the team to do kind of specific project-based things as well. Unfortunately, I can't give any solid examples just because it's very particular to a project's quirks and the studio that I would have worked at the time. But depending on the show, like, yes, it does change. So generally the bigger shows with the larger sequences and shot count would be the ones where I'd really try and like flex my Python muscles and like automate things for myself to save a bit of time and spend that time on actually doing the fun shots and stuff myself, or giving these tools to my team to help them out too.
So how do you decide between, because obviously there is a time overhead in writing a Python script. Mm-hmm. How do you make the decision this is worth spending that time writing the Python script versus just doing the thing?
That's a really good question. The way I think about it is, if I'm going to do something more than once, it's worth the time overhead. So Python is very helpful for repeating tasks over and over or doing it more than once. So if it's going to take me an hour to do and I only have to do it once, I'll just do it. But if it's going to be an hour every day, like, or even like a couple of times throughout the project, that's when I stick my head into some code.
That makes sense. Okay, this one is, hey Ben, what's the weirdest thing you can do in Nuke with Python?
So something else I did when I was learning is you can change any aspect of Nuke, and it was one of the most pointless exercises I did for myself, but I wanted to see if I could change the color scheme of Nuke, like the background of the node graph and like some of the toolbars to whatever different colors. There's also a function in Python standard library to get a randomized like number, I guess, at a certain interval. So I wrote a Python script that when you activate it, it just like rapidly like changes Nuke's GUI through a rainbow. So not useful at all, but that's definitely the weirdest thing that I've done.
So it's an epilepsy generator.
Yep, exactly.
Amazing. Okay, so a question that is just, how do I read and understand the Nuke API? I'm assuming that's the Nuke Python API. It can be quite confusing. Do you have any tips on understanding that?
I think the only way to dive into it is really to do so and immerse yourself in it. And I like to think of learning any programming language like learning any other language. Like if you're trying to use a website or an app to like learn Spanish, for example, like you can kind of pick up a few bits and pieces, but it's not until you're in an environment where you have to like speak the language or write the language until it really sticks. And something I put a huge emphasis on in my course is exactly that. So I can appreciate that everyone kind of has their own styles of how they want to learn. So I put a lot of time into creating video tutorials and also like written, like a written guide as well. Something like kind of interesting that I do when I read books that I need to read to retain information is I'll try and listen to the audiobook and read the text at the same time, and having like multiple sources of like data, I guess, coming into your brain kind of helps that stick as well. So I guess it's mostly practice and immersing yourself in it is the best way to go about it.
Mm-hmm. So the question is there any way to lock the node sliders? How do I do this in Python?
Yeah, so there's, like anything, there's a couple of different ways. I do have a post on my blog about how to do that, which will take me a second to pull up. So I won't pull it up now, but I'll post it in the chat after it's done. Yeah, that's probably the best way, because it's a little too complex to kind of like elaborate without an example.
Okay. And then another question, which is just, hi Ben, when I right click on a knob and go into the edit expression, there are two tabs, P and R. What's the difference? Yeah,
great question. One is for using TCL and one's for using Python. So by default, you get the TCL thing. And if you hit P, that'll take you into Python mode. So we kind of touched on this a little bit before. Most of the expressions you'll write, if it's just one little tiny code, will be TCL. But if you need to do something a little bit more in depth, you can click the P button, and then that will take you to Python mode.
Cool. Could you recommend a good Python project to show in your portfolio? So it's an interesting question, is how do you represent your Python skills? Everybody's got a show reel, but...
Exactly. That is an interesting question, but I think there's ways that you can get creative about it. Right now, a lot of compositors that I've met don't know too much Python, and they always express their interest in wanting to learn it. Hence this webinar and the course that I put together. But I think the way that I've seen it shown by others is some people have like a Nuke TD reel where they demonstrate the tools that they make, and they even take screenshots of their code. Sometimes people have written it in their CV, like, I know Python and this is how I've helped my company by using it, and here's like a list of things or like problems that I've solved with it. So the sky's kind of the limit, and just like you've probably seen 1001 show reels before, and they're all cut differently with different music, different like title cards and stuff. It's kind of the same thing.
Cool. If possible, what's the biggest challenge you've solved using Python?
Right. Again, it's kind of project specific, but to kind of go away from that, I worked with a studio who was setting up shop in Vancouver a little while ago, and sitting down from day one, we had Nuke installed. We had an awesome pipeline team like working to start building that pipeline, but we kind of needed something in the interim. So the biggest project that I undertook was trying to like make those tools that I was so used to using every day at some of the other studios that I've worked with, and bring those to that studio and like help my team use those too.
Cool. So quick question from Dave Phillips. How much does your course cost?
It is $49.99 Canadian.
Cool. It's very good value, I would hasten to add. So there's a question here.
Yes, David, David, I have a question for you. Aren't you taking the course?
I am taking the course. I've taken half the course so far, and I really enjoyed it. And when time permits, I will finish taking it because it is very good.
Awesome.
So there's a question here about using Python neural network libraries. Now, I don't know if this is something that you can speak to.
Yeah, so it's something that I talk about a lot in Ben's Comp newsletter. Usually the last thing I like to post in the newsletter is kind of something that points in the direction of where the industry is heading, or like something to inspire you. And something that I'm really keeping an eye on at the moment is neural networks and the benefits that machine learning could have in visual effects, and specifically in compositing. Like, we all want to automate the boring stuff, so to speak. Again, it's one of those questions, like how long is a piece of string kind of thing. There's so many ways to answer that. There are a lot of open source libraries that you can find on GitHub, written by all sorts of companies, and the way to use them, like, you can't necessarily pull them off GitHub, install them in Nuke, and get going, because they're written to do specific things in itself, rather than being tools that you can be like, oh, just copy paste into Nuke and away we go. So it's more like a boilerplate, so to speak. You've probably seen a few things online for Flame about de-aging and face replacements using these neural networks. Those are kind of written to the back end of that machine learning component is the library of faces and the training there. But how you actually use that data inside of Nuke or anywhere else requires like quite a lot of custom code to do it. That would be a very good project, but not one I would recommend for your first thing.
Yes, machine learning is a very complex area. We do have a open source machine learning tool called the ML server, which is a tool that allows you to import algorithms that machine learning algorithms and try them in Nuke. So it's a chance to experiment with things that way and have a look at the potential power of machine learning. So that's something else to explore. All right, and I think we're nearly at the time, so I'm just going to see if there are any other quick questions. How do you set up an efficient Nuke programming environment or in an external IDE?
Right. I feel like we touched on that a little bit in the course. I usually, again, depending on the studio that you work at, there could be different things in place to limit you or allow you to do what you need. Generally, I will use Sublime, mostly because I can use it on Windows and Linux. And I'll write my code in there and I'll copy paste that into the script editor to run, or just save it directly in my menu PY. There's no extra like executable files or anything you need to run the code. It's just you need something like an IDE with some nice syntax highlighting to read and write, and then Nuke will run it. Great.
And how do I add functionality to an enumeration knob when an option is selected?
Oh, that's a good one. Again, it's I can appreciate that it's pretty difficult to give you a solution that's supposed to be like programmatically through text. So I'll instead divert you to my blog. Something that I do a lot is write little quick tips of Python to just say, this is how you do a thing. So the way you add functionality to an enumeration knob when an option is selected will be via a callback. So I'm going to do my best to elaborate this briefly. The callbacks are kind of like something that anytime you select or interact or do anything with a node, the callback is like a hidden knob in that node that like generates code in the background. And you have to write that code and assign it to the knob change, callback knob, I guess. That's probably the briefest way that I can explain it. But I will share some links in the chat after this session's over to these sorts of things.
Cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot of links to various articles in your blog that could answer a lot of things.
I just saw Attila posted a thing to the Python developer guide on callbacks, so that's a great resource to look at.
Perfect. All right, good. So just looking through to see if there are any other questions. There's a question that asks, there are many platforms offering complete Nuke courses on plural sites, Udemy, FXPhD, but most of these are for compositors who don't often deal with Python. Are we planning on releasing official Foundry courses? The answer to that is we're not planning on releasing official ones. There are lots of really good courses out there by contributors to the VFX community. Ben's Python course is one that we've touched on. Hugo, who I believe is still in the chat, has some excellent learning resources as well. And we prefer to let the experts make the training materials, and we focus on making the software. So I would encourage you to seek out your favorite VFX contributor and give them your money. All right. I think we're probably out of time at this point. At this point, Jen is supposed to jump in and give a wrap up of this evening's events, but I think her internet has crashed. So it falls to me to say thank you very much, Ben. It's been great to chat to you. I would encourage everybody, we've plugged it a lot, but I'm going to give it one last plug. Ben's comp newsletter is excellent. Everybody go and subscribe to it. We also mentioned that we're going to give away 5 copies of Ben's Python training course to attendees of this webinar, and there they are. There are the winners. So congratulations to the 5 people listed on the screen. I think that's anything. I'm going to give you a chance to say any last words, Ben.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks everyone for coming out, and thanks for having me, Foundry. If you've got any questions or any follow-ups, you can find me online. I'm everywhere.
All right. Thank you everybody for attending. Thanks once again to Ben for this great session. There are further Foundry sessions and webinars coming up in the next few days and weeks. So check out the Foundry events page for more information on that. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.